Since the Justice and Development Party, AK Party, still wields executive powers despite its loss of a single-party government on June 7, the suggestion of an Islamic democracy by one of its strongest religious ideologues raises suspicions, especially due to limitations on certain rights and freedoms that are enjoyed in a liberal democracy. In his latest columns at the staunchly pro-government Yeni Sayfak, professor of Islamic law Hayrettin Karaman suggested the model of Islamic democracy for Turkey, since a system that does not rely on revelation cannot compromise or get along with Islam. Moreover, Karaman argues that some restrictions based on general morality and public order would not make such a system anti-democratic. Although Karaman does not specify which restrictions he talks about, his statements cannot be overlooked as personal statements given his clear impact on AK Party politicians. Karaman is known for his religious permission for asking for donations in return for public tenders, which constitutes the moral justification for corruption and bribery for many within AK Party cadres. Following the massive corruption investigations of December 17 and 25, Karaman had written that corruption could not be considered the same as stealing. According to religious scholar with a Ph.D. in Islamic jurisprudence Dr. Ahmet Kurucan, such a quest to compare Islam and a regime type is mistaken in the first place. It is like comparing Islam and the West, it should be West and the East, Kurucan told Sunday's Zaman. According to him, it is not possible to talk about an incompatibility of Islam with democracy, since Islam does not suggest a constant and universal regime type. Moreover, Kurucan unequivocally rejects the idea of restriction of rights and freedoms, since there is no such premise in verses or hadiths of the Quran. Democracy cannot be Islamic or Christian. While Karaman argues there is no consensus over the definition of democracy, which leads to different versions of it, political scientist and Professor Ersin Kalakalu from Zaman University argues the opposite. He refers to Robert Dahl's definition of democracy and says that there is an acceptance of his criteria, which include but are not limited to freedom of expression, freedom to dissent, assembly and consent. Democracy is not defined based on a religion, but rights and freedoms, Kalakalu points out, adding that democracy is democracy only if those criteria are acknowledged. Describing such suggestions as half-baked ideas, Kalakalu asks the AK Party religious ideologue Karaman if he welcomes the recently drafted Constitution of Tunisia, which reconciles Islam and democracy. There is no such thing as Islamic democracy as there is no Christian democracy, states Kalakalu, making a distinction between parties established by members of a religion. There could be an Islamic democracy party, but no Islamic democracy, Kalakalu says to clarify his point. Not much attention is paid to suggestions for an Islamic democracy, with few exceptions. In the initial years of the AK Party government, secularists especially were suspicious of its Islamic agenda, but now the focus has shifted to the rise of authoritarianism. Yet columnist Naray Mert questioned Karaman's statements, saying that his knowledge on debates of democracy lags behind the contemporary literature. Mert, in her column, basically challenges Karaman and the AK Party to make their intentions clear on a future vision of Turkey. AK Party, we have our version of democracy. According to Taraf columnist and political scientist Sezen Oni, who talked to Sunday's Zaman, what Karaman does is offer a la AK Party political theory in a popularized form which may be easily communicated. For her, there is a distinction within the AK Party between inner ideological cadres and outer shells of ideological preachers. She argues that core AK Party people such as Chairman and Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's advisor Brahim Kalin, both academics, are the ones who aim to construct a political theory. The conservative-friendly liberals, on the other hand, are featured in the media and have an expiry date because they are used to boost the self-confidence of the AKP supporting grassroots, by promoting the AKP. They were also used to convince those who were skeptical of the AK Party's religious motives, Oni argues, but for her the AK Party no longer feels the need to convince anyone about its secularity, and the AK Party grassroots have enough self-confidence. Consequently, Oni points out that in Karaman's line of logic, Western-oriented definitions of democracy cannot fit to our realities, our traditions. So, the Western world's and Western-oriented Turkey's elite criticisms would be futile. According Karaman's thinking, we have our own version of democracy. Indeed, even before Karaman's suggestion for a democracy that is customized according to religion, there has been debate in the Western and domestic media whether Turkey could be considered a democracy given the tremendous pressure on media and the disintegration of judicial independence and the rule of law. Articles like Karaman's raise already existing concerns over the future of Turkey's regime. In addition to offering an Islamic democracy for Turkey, since Western democracy is not compatible with Islam, Karaman had also defended in December 2013 sacrificing a certain group or individual within a society for the sake of the greater good. Many among the AK party circles bring examples from Ottoman history of the execution of the brothers of the Sultan to prevent a struggle for power. However, Kurucan states that such practices, including the execution of crown princes, could not be justified based on Islamic law. He underlines the distinction between tradition and Islam itself, saying that what we know of the history of Islam is indeed the history of Muslims. Kurucan also refers to the first contract of the Muslims, known as the Medina document from the era of the Prophet Muhammad, which arranges relations not only among Muslims, but also between Muslims and non-Muslims to support peaceful coexistence. They have defined themselves according to conditions, Kalakalu told Sunday's Zaman, citing examples from the controversial foreign policy stances of the government that led Turkey for the last 13 years. I would define the AK party as a conservative party with roots in the Islamic movement, Kalakalu states. To support Erdogan's changing stance, he refers to Erdogan's talk in Egypt that praised secularism. We cannot make a clear-cut description of the AK party, consequently, he notes. For only the AK party is clearly a dominant and populist right-wing party. While the AK party's dominance is clear for Oni, she defines populism as taking the shape of the political cup it is poured in. Essentially, it relies on an us versus them mentality, opposition, tension, and polarization, Oni comments. According to her, in this sense, the rhetorical use of Islamism by the AK party, the notion of being the excluded black Turk, deprived and belittled by white Turks, is a product of Turkey's own specific context. In the months to come, Turkey will be wasting its energy on the very likely early elections given the failure of coalition talks, but the AK party still remains a popular party in the heartland, Anatolia. As a result, its vision for Turkey, especially considering Erdogan's undeniable impact within the party, continues to matter. According to Oni, there will be a good cop bad cop role division between Erdogan and Davutoglu. Erdogan will continue with the populist rhetoric of people versus elite, while Davutoglu will act as an envoy of shuttle diplomacy between people and the elite, she argues. However, despite its significance, it would not be wrong to assume that the debate over the AK party's vision for Turkey's regime will be confined to a small circle of intellectuals and elites, as people will be worried about the economy and their everyday life concerns.